The therapist asked my father to describe my childhood. He couldn't name a single friend I'd ever had. Dr. Walsh repeated the question twice before my father stopped fidgeting with his wedding ring. The family counseling session was my mother's idea, a last-ditch effort to reconnect before I graduated and disappeared from their lives forever. My father sat in the leather chair like he was waiting for a job interview. Rehearsed smile, perfect posture, completely empty eyes. I'd agreed to this because my mother had been crying for weeks, but watching my father pretend to care felt like swallowing glass. Dr. Walsh tried again. Raymond, can you tell me about Ethan's childhood? Who were his close friends? What activities did he enjoy? My father nodded confidently and said, of course, he was always with that boy from down the street, Tommy. They played video games constantly. I felt my jaw tighten. I've never known anyone named Tommy. I grew up in an apartment building with no boys my age on our floor. Dr. Walsh looked at me for confirmation, and I just shook my head slowly. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. My father didn't even notice he'd gotten it wrong. He tried again, stumbling through made-up memories like a student who hadn't read the book. He mentioned baseball trophies I never won, camping trips we never took, a treehouse he never built. Each fabrication landed like a punch to my chest, but I stayed silent because I'd learned years ago that correcting him only made things worse. He'd get defensive, my mother would cry, and somehow I'd end up apologizing for making him feel bad. But Dr. Walsh wasn't letting him off the hook. She pulled out a worksheet she'd had me fill out the week before. Ethan listed his 3 closest childhood friends as David Kim, Wesley Okonkwo, and Jerome Baptiste. Do any of those names sound familiar? My father's face went blank, not confused, blank. Like a computer processing a question it wasn't programmed to answer. He'd never heard those names in his life. David lived next door for 8 years. Wesley was my best friend from 4th grade through middle school. Jerome and I were inseparable in high school. They'd all been to our apartment dozens of times. My father had walked past them in the hallway, nodded at their parents, even complained about the noise we made, but he'd never actually seen them, never learned their names, never asked a single question about who they were or why they mattered to me. Dr. Walsh handed him another worksheet, the one where I'd written about the worst moment of my childhood. My father read it silently, and I watched his face for any recognition. The page described the day I was 12 and got suspended for fighting. What my father didn't know, what he'd never bothered to ask, was that I'd been defending a smaller kid from 3 bullies. When I came home with a black eye and a suspension notice, my father had grounded me for a month without asking what happened. He'd lectured me about responsibility and consequences while I sat there with ice on my face, knowing I'd done the right thing. The principal had actually called me brave. My father had called me a disappointment. He set the paper down and finally looked at me, actually looked at me, for maybe the first time in years. I didn't know, he whispered. You never told me. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder I'd created the night before. Screenshots of every text I'd sent him in the past 4 years. Dozens of messages about school, about friends, about things I was struggling with. His responses were always the same. 1 or 2 words, if anything at all. I showed him the message I'd sent when Wesley's mother died, asking if we could send flowers. His response was a thumbs up emoji. I showed him the text about Jerome making the basketball team, inviting him to come watch a game, left on read. I showed him 16 birthday messages to him over the years, where I'd actually tried to connect. He'd answered exactly 3 of them. My mother was crying now, but something had shifted in the room. This wasn't about making my father feel guilty anymore. This was evidence. This was proof that I hadn't imagined the distance, hadn't exaggerated the absence, hadn't been dramatic or ungrateful. I'd been reaching out to a man who was never there, even when he was sitting right next to me. Dr. Walsh asked my father one final question. Raymond, what does Ethan want to be when he grows up? He hesitated, then guessed, a lawyer? Maybe business? I've wanted to be a veterinarian since I was 6. I've had a poster of animal anatomy on my bedroom wall for over a decade. He walks past it every day. My father didn't fight for custody during my parents' divorce 3 months later. He didn't fight for anything at all. Last I heard, he'd moved to another state with a woman he'd met online, starting fresh with her 2 kids from a previous marriage. I hope he learns their friends' names. I graduated with honors last spring, got accepted to veterinary school with a full scholarship, and David, Wesley, and Jerome all came to the ceremony. My mother took a photo of the 4 of us with our arms around each other. She framed it and hung it in the living room where my father's portrait used to be.